In today's show, we're talking about day 3 of NBA free agency. As things start to wind down, we'll go through all of the moves and cover off who the best available players are. Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter, as always, at redrock_bball, on TikTok, at redrock_bball, and on Instagram, at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit fanduel.com/lockedon today to get started. Thank you for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free. We are available on all platforms. So I'm recording this at 8 p.m. Sunday, July the 3rd. Day 3 of NBA free agency. Things have started to wind down. This will probably be my last free agency recap show in terms of just recapping the deals that happened. There will be more shows coming this week, but I just want to just spend 2 minutes here just to tell you sort of what's happening over the next couple of weeks. I will be, in the next couple of days, pre-recording a couple of shows that run this week, just talking about winners and losers of free agency. It looks like I won't be recording anything on Damian Lillard or James Harden being traded at any point in the next day or two. We will see where that ends up going. And then next week on the show, you will have shows that I've already recorded. 5 shows pre-recorded because I will be over in Summer League. Now, if you are at Vegas Summer League and you see me there, I am there the first 3 days. Come up and say hi. Don't have to worry about saying hi. Well, don't have to worry about saying hi. Don't have to worry about bothering me to come up, say hello if you see me there at Vegas Summer League. I won't be recording podcasts or full YouTube videos while I am in Vegas because it's part of me being, I'm there working, obviously, but I'm also enjoying a slight vacation / honeymoon while I'm there. So I won't be recording full videos. But what I will do, stay tuned to my Instagram and to my TikTok, and YouTube Shorts as well. I will put out obviously the shorts, I'll put out small clips on things that I see at Summer League. So maybe like a 1 minute, 2 minute recap of things that I see. So if you want to keep up to date with that, and then when I come back, which will be at the very end of Summer League, after Summer League is over, we'll do a full Summer League recap and we'll go through things. And if something happens while I'm there, like a Lillard trade or Levine is traded or Harden gets dealt, I will do something through one of those platforms, but it won't be a full podcast, almost assuredly, unless I find access to a studio, because I'm not taking my equipment over. If you saw what my studio looked like, it's not possible to do that. So that's the sort of rundown of things that happen. There will still be content coming. It'll be more in the Instagram stories, Instagram Reels, Instagram or TikToks, YouTube Shorts, and through the Twitter account as well as what I'm putting out there. So that gets all of that stuff out of the way. Still more shows coming this week. Don't worry about that. If you are on YouTube, and I never say this at the start of the show, hit subscribe. We hit 60,000 subs during the season. Once the season was over, we dropped back down, but we're pushing back up. We're like 40 people away from hitting 60,000 subs again. Have a double celebration. So if you are watching this, hit that subscribe button. It's awesome. I love it when you do it. Let's talk about free agency. Let's talk about the moves that have happened since I last recorded. There's nothing hugely interesting. Some of the things are interesting. I can't remember if I told you who this episode was brought to you by, but I should do it again. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit fanduel.com/lockedon today to get started. Apologies if I did it twice. Apologies if I did it late. Whoever's listening, you can take whatever apology is applicable to you. Let's talk about these deals. Lonnie.
Let's get it on, Gilly.
All right. Dante Exum. Did not expect Dante Exum to be back in the NBA, but here we are. 1 year, $2.7 million deal to go back to Dallas. Exum played for Partizan in Europe last season, along with early second round draft pick Tristan Vukcevic, and a lot of former NBA draft picks and NBA players. Mateus Lesor was in that. Mateus Lesor, former Sixers big man draft pick. Who else was on that roster? Pistons legend Bolsa Kaprovica, who was traded to the Clippers. Draft rights was traded to the Clippers 2 days ago for $2 million for some reason I don't know. Celtics draft pick Yamada, Israeli point guard. James Nunnally, who we saw in the league. Alan Smilajic from the Golden State Warriors, and Tristan Vukcevic. So Exum played on that team. Part of what you might have seen Exum for recently was he was the bloke who got body slammed by Gerson Yabusele in that EuroLeague final match against Real Madrid and got absolutely pummeled. Exum had a pretty strong season. Now, he's not going to start because Kyrie and Luka are there. He's not going to do that. But the role that like a Frank Ntilikina had last season, there's still Jaden Hardy there pretty clearly. But Exum was able to, and I think this is what's important to note, improve his shooting. He still has a lot of issues with his body and injuries, and he's not going to be able to play big minutes, but he doesn't have to do that. He's just a guy that I think they can be okay with considering as a rotation player. He shot 39% from three on almost 3 attempts per game. He got his free throws to 85%. In fact, his 2 years in Europe, 84.7% and 84.7%. And he did struggle with that at times. He averaged 3 assists a game. He averaged 12 points in 22 minutes for Partizan coming off the bench. He's just a solid defensive-sized wing guard, point guard who provides insurance that's better than having Theo Pinson run that offense. So he's back. He's not going to be a fantasy guy. And even if Kyrie or Luka went down with a long-term injury and Exum became a starter, knock on wood, that's what that noise is, Exum's not a great fantasy accumulator. But I think he has improved his game enough to be a useful enough NBA player. We just hope that he stays healthy. He's 6'6", he's got size. It's good. I didn't see this one yesterday, but Josh Christopher was a part of the deal where, and I think there's a million teams involved in this deal, where Dylan Brooks was moved to Houston as a sign and trade. Josh Christopher moved to Memphis in that deal. Now, Houston has cleared out a bunch of players. Ty Washington, Usman Garuba go to Atlanta. Josh Christopher goes to Memphis. KJ Martin goes to the Clippers. They are doing one of the weirdest off seasons I've ever seen. And I think that Christopher still could have developed into a rotation player. Maybe there's an opportunity for him in Memphis. We'll see what they can do with him. But and I put this tweet out yesterday saying, man, what are the Rockets doing? They had this young core and then they just bury them by bringing in these other players so they can win 10 more games. And people thought I was talking about trading away Washington and Garuba and Christopher. And while I like all those players, that wasn't what I was talking about. I was talking about the fact that now Kevin Porter Jr. is not really going to play. Tari Eason, who was impactful as a second-year player, is not really going to play. First round draft pick, number 4 overall, Amen Thompson, is not going to play a big role. Cam Whitmore, who they lucked into a pick 20, is not really going to see the floor. And while you can say, well, at some point you've got to get adults in the room, like what does Dylan Brooks actually do for you? What does Jeff Green do for you? Green in the locker room, I get it, but it's a weird pivot that this doesn't make them a title contender. This doesn't make them a conference finals contender. I don't even think it makes them a top 6 playoff contender. Whereas I think if you had still kept developing these younger players in solid enough roles, it probably would have worked. But I don't know. There's still more to come with Houston. Anyway, Josh Christopher in Memphis, watch it because they're going to start the season with Smart, with Bane, and then there is another opening there on the wing. I wouldn't think Christopher would get a nod at starting because Johnny Conchard's still there, and there's other guys that can slide in there, but Jar's out. And Christopher's it's a little bit of development. Is he ahead of like a Zaire Williams? I think he could be. That's something to watch. I just quickly mentioned this, Patty Mills. We thought he was going to Houston. He's not. He's ending up in Oklahoma City. They have just 1 million people on their roster. Mills possibly gets cut. They get a trade exception and a draft pick out of this. They got him. They acquired Bertans. They got Victor Oladipo. These are all guys who they just got to bring in with the salary cap and to get some draft capital again, but they're not going to use them. This one is important. Eric Gordon goes to the Phoenix Suns on a 2-year, $6.5 million contract. Basically a minimum, but a 2-year minimum for Eric Gordon. The Suns, while I was a little bit critical of them getting Bradley Beal because not that they gave up a huge amount to do it because they gave up nothing. It was more like there's a little bit of duplicative stats between him and Booker, or how do they complement each other enough? How does Beal work in a small role? Does he give enough in that area? Is he sort of player you want? And then the restrictions that came along with getting Beal in terms of the guys that you could sign. But I could not find a better use of free agency for where they were in position with the hamstring nature of their team. Bringing in the guys that they have, including Eric Gordon, who's probably going to get the most minutes off the bench. He'll back up. And will they start Booker and Beal? I think they could, but they could very easily start Payne, Booker, Beal, Durant, Ayton. There's one spot there. It's either going to be Payne or it's going to be a mixture of Bates, Diop, Okogie, Wainwright. If I was there, the decision would be between Payne and Bates, Diop. I think Booker can be full-time point guard, and I called for that about 4 years ago. So I would probably put Bates, Diop in there, but they could chuck... They don't even have Torrey Craig on this team. They could chuck Okogie out there as well, which would make some sense. But in terms of bench players, I suppose you could even start Eric Gordon. I don't think they would. Eric Gordon is going to get the most minutes. He's not going to be a fantasy-relevant player for standard leagues, but he's going to help. And that bench now is going to have... Well, we've got those 4 starters, and then let's just say that Payne is the starter. Then there's Bates, Diop. There's Drew Eubanks as a backup center. There's Eric Gordon. There's Chimezi Metu. There's Josh Okogie. There's Yuta Watanabe, who actually might be a starting option as well. There's Jordan Goodwin, who's a rotation caliber player. Damian Lee. It's just an unbelievably filled out roster. Now, if I'm looking at my numbers here, they've got 15. Their roster's full, so I'm going to guess that Tumani Kamara will be on a 2-way for them, and that's their 16 guys. That's honestly just an unbelievable free agency given the restrictions that Phoenix had. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Take your first swing at betting Major League Baseball on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 that you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to hit the first home run. All on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on Major League Baseball, and NBA Summer League than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. What do you think of the Suns off-season? Would you put them as favorites? I am going to do a show on this that might come tomorrow or the day after. Which teams got better, which teams got worse. The Suns got better. The Nuggets got worse. So where does that put them? The Lakers got better, I think. They probably did get better. So are they the clear top 3 teams in the West? Memphis probably worse, but maybe not. Like Marcus Smart's an upgrade over Tyus Jones. So did they get better? A lot of that stuff hinges on Jar and the injury status for Steven Adams. But, there's a lot of teams getting better in the West. It's going to be, and Denver, at this point, you have to argue they got worse. They made a signing today, which we'll talk about, but they have so far gotten worse, which is not great. Cody Zeller goes to New Orleans, 1-year minimum salary. He was in Utah's camp at the start of the season last year, and then he was cut, and then he signed in end of March for the Heat, and he was their backup center. So the Heat, me recording this now, I do not know what's happening with Damian Lillard. We assume that he is favored to go there, but with the way that things currently stand, the Heat have taken L's all over the place in free agency. Gabe Vincent gone, Max Strus gone, Cody Zeller gone. They brought in Thomas Bryant, but come on. They have taken L's. Now that could all change if Lillard comes in, and maybe that is a huge W for them, probably is. But so far, the Heat are a big L in terms of free agency. Zeller, they had Jackson Hayes and Billy Hernan-Gomez backing up Valanciunas. Hayes has gone to the Lakers. Hernan-Gomez currently remains unsigned. Zeller is probably an upgrade over those guys. You don't want him to be a big minute player, but 20 minutes a night, maybe not even 15 minutes a night with Larry Nance playing some center, I think that actually strengthens their big man rotation. Lonnie Walker goes to the Nets, a 1-year deal. I don't know the money on this. It hasn't been reported anywhere. Was it a minimum? Was it like an exception signing, like a $6 million? I don't know what it was. It's 1 year. Walker got the mid-level 1-year deal with the Lakers last season. They couldn't go over 120% of his contract to re-sign him, but they could have re-signed him, I'm guessing, at the price that Brooklyn did, and they chose not to. Lonnie Walker is definitely, to me, in the class of players, Mo Bamba and Cam Reddish captain this squad, of the players that people will tell you are great and they just need a chance. I will never believe it for Lonnie Walker. He has had a chance. He has played 5 years in the NBA, 2 different teams. He just isn't particularly good. He had an opportunity this year to start for the Lakers. He had a really hot streak early in the year. He had a knee injury, but he also had fallen out of favor before that and was out of the rotation at the end of the season, had 1 strong quarter in the playoffs. But he's a guy with a waxing and waning shot who doesn't really do anything else. He doesn't defend. He doesn't pass. He's not a rebounder. And he's inconsistent with his shooting. The Nets are still in a weird situation. They're probably going to start Dinwiddie, Bridges, Johnson, Finney-Smith, Clarkson, with O'Neal coming off the bench. And then you've got Dennis Smith, Cam Thomas, and Lonnie Walker as backup guards. Walker would need 35 minutes a night and be the number one option on a team to be a fantasy relevant guy, or number two option on a team, and that's just not going to happen there in Brooklyn. Is he an okay depth piece? Yeah, I don't. If I was them, and I am not a huge Cam Thomas believer, I'd play Cam Thomas over him. Thomas to me has got way more potential and is a better shooter and probably and clearly a better scorer than Walker. Yes, he's worse at some other things, but not that much worse. So I don't mind bringing him in. 1 year, cheap deal, rotation piece. They lost Seth Curry and Joe Harris as well, so there are some minutes there for him on the wing, the 2 or the 3, whatever you want to say. But he's not a guy that's going to be an impact player, I don't think. I said that the Nuggets made a move. They did. They bring in Justin Holiday on a 1 year minimum salary deal. Holiday's been... Have you guys played that game, Crossover? The game, it's like that immaculate grid for baseball, a little bit different, where you got to have the 3 columns and match the teams of guys that have played for both teams. Justin Holiday's a GOAT in that. Like, he's played for so many teams. Him, Ish Smith, Jeff Green, chuck him in all those different spots, and they match so many of those different situations. Rob Covington's getting to that spot as well. Holiday had been this solid guy who was a 40% shooter who could defend okay, but was often overrated by teams. But to me, I thought he looked dreadful last season. I think he's cooked. I thought he looked pretty bad in Atlanta. He came to Dallas, and reputation alone got him starting those first 2 games. And then Jason Kidd did a good thing and went, oh no, and took him out of the rotation. Everything should be there. Like, he's a 6'5-ish, 6'4", 6'5" shooting guard, small forward, who has had 40% 3-point shooting seasons from 3 in the past and has been a good defender. Unfortunately, he's not a good defender anymore. He has just... It's again those guys who are, much like we go back to Phoenix, talk about Torrey Craig, who are older players who have these little runs where you go, oh, that's interesting, that's nice. Yeah, you would fit on a winning team. He's actually 6'6", sorry, not 6'5". You fit on a winning team, you did some okay things, but as soon as you start to hit that peak, and Holiday is now 34, and you've gone past your prime, the drop-off becomes significant. And that happened last season. He shot 32% from 3 only. He played 15 minutes a game. The only 2 games he started were the 2 games with Dallas. He averaged under half a steal a game. The numbers just dropped significantly. So he's just not good anymore. He's not the level that Bruce Brown was. I would definitely be playing Christian Brown over him, and I would hope that like a Julian Strawther can beat out Justin Holiday for some other rotation minutes, take the Christian Brown role, the 10 minutes a night. And I think that Peyton Watson should be getting the Jeff Green minutes there in Denver. So Holiday, while we've heard the name, he's been useful. He's played 10 years in the league. He's had some good moments. I think he's cooked. I think he's rooted. And their bench consisting of him, who's finished, DeAndre Jordan, who's finished, Reggie Jackson, who's finished, it's a little worrisome. Yes, there are still very good players on this team. But when your moves are bringing back Jordan, bringing back Jackson, bringing in Holiday, and I think reaching for Hunter Tyson in the draft, reaching for Jalen Pickett in the draft, and Strawther, not a bad pick. It's an hell of an offseason so far. I expect Watson to step up and be pretty good in a backup role. I think Christian Brown is going to be solid into a Bruce Brown sort of role, but yeah, they got worse, I think, at this point. I think they got worse. Malcolm Casalon signed with the Pistons on a 2-way. I was a little bit surprised that Casalon didn't get drafted. And I thought, maybe he didn't get drafted because there was word from his agents that he wanted to go back to Europe and he wasn't going to come over. But no, he's playing for the Pistons on a 2-way. He is a French 6'6" wing/forward, which the Pistons need. Right? They went from a team having everyone's a center to now everyone's a point guard. They still need a power forward because Isaiah Stewart's not it, and Bojan Bogdanovic should be traded. And Casalon's not going to play tons. He's a 2-way guy. But there's upside here. He's 21. He only shot 32% last season, so that needs to be worked on. But he's almost like a typical European wing sort of player. A shot that can be iffy. He can pass. He can defend. I think he's an interesting guy to take a 2-way, and I think that when we look at the Pistons roster, I think he's better than the guys they had last year on a 2-way, Buddy Boeheim in particular. But could he develop into a player that ends up better than Isaiah Livers? And I like Isaiah Livers. Maybe. Is he, he's not going to play because they've got Joe Harris, they've got Livers, they've got Asar Thompson. I said they didn't have wings. That's not fair. Those guys can fit that role. But I think it's just a good move to get someone like Casaloni. And again, I will always be critical of the Pistons because I think their overall team building stuff is bad most of the time. But getting Monte Morris for literally nothing was a good move. Getting Malcolm Casalon on a two-way, I think, is a strong move. Some of their other stuff, iffy. Let's talk about players who stayed in the same place. Big signing for Domantas Sabonis. 5 years, $217 million renegotiation and extension. That's like about $195 extra new money. They bumped his salary for this season up, I think, $8 or $9 million. It's not quite the max he could have taken, as they were at pains to point out to help their team building. My question with the Kings is, and I know that I've seen so much Danish backhanding of Monty McNair. What a GM. Unbelievable. He's been awesome. And, okay, I don't agree. What did they do? They traded away pick 24 to get off of Rashawn Holmes to do what? They didn't bring anybody in. They traded for Chris Duarte. Okay, fine. They re-signed their own free agent in Trey Lyles, which they had bird rights on. They re-signed their own free agent in Harrison Barnes, who they had bird rights on. They renegotiated and extended their All-NBA center, who was quite bad in the playoffs. And one of my criticisms of the Halliburton-Sabonis trade for the Kings is, are you just doing this trade so you can get into the playoffs? And that's successful because I think I think Sabonis' ceiling is lower than Halliburton's, and Sabonis' defensive issues and fit problems are going to cause real problems when you get into the playoffs. Now, that's not to say that it'll always be the case, but that literally is exactly what happened last season. And you gave away a draft pick, cost-controlled draft pick of a guy that I think would have fit pretty bloody nicely on this team in Omax Prosper eventually, to actually do nothing. You could have done every one of those moves. They brought in Sasha Vesenkov as well. Again, they had his draft rights. He's a good player. I like Vesenkov. But I think now maybe I'm wrong. There's some cap person out there that tells me they couldn't have brought Vesenkov over or traded for Duarte without giving up pick 24. Then okay. But I believe that they could have done every single one of their off-season moves, and maybe they couldn't have extended or renegotiated and extended Sabonis. They didn't need to. He was under contract, and yes, he was a free agent next off-season, but they could have still just, if he's willing to go 5 years now, why wouldn't he have been willing to sign the extension or sign the new contract next off-season? Doesn't appear like he wanted to leave. He seems pretty comfortable there. It's like, did they sign him here to hoodwink it? Oh, we've got you now. You're never going to go anywhere. And he would have just left last time. Because if he wanted to leave in the off-season, next off-season, he wouldn't have signed this. Surely. I know things can change in 12 months. But I don't see a single move that they made that they couldn't have made without giving up pick 24 for literally nothing. And maybe they could not, and I'm pretty sure they could have brought in Vesenkov. I think it was an exception they brought him over. Maybe the one thing they couldn't do was actually just renegotiate up Sabonis' contract, which they didn't need to do. So while they probably do get better, they lose Terrence Davis. Well, I think they've lost Terrence Davis. They probably are slightly better just for bringing Vesenkov over. But you gave up an asset when you didn't have to. And that was my fear that they, in the past, when they were trading away picks and pick swaps so they could go and sign free agents and end up with Rajon Rondo, I said, I hope it doesn't end up being that. And it looks like they cleared cap space and didn't know why they were. Maybe I'm completely off on this. But with the West, again, getting stronger, Phoenix getting better, the Lakers getting better, did the Kings get better? I'm not sure. The man on the street, Jordan Clarkson.
JordanClarkson.
Renegotiates and extends as well. He opted into his player option. He's got 3 years total now, $55 million left over. He was a guy that people were very, very hesitant to draft last season. Man, they're going to tank. He's going to get traded, definitely. And this is one of those ones that I got right because I said, hey, look, I heard from Utah that he's not being traded. They love him here and they want him on this team. And that was clearly the case. And he was pretty solid. And this is what I said last week, I think, when they traded for John Collins. So this trade for John Collins indicates to me that they will be keeping Jordan Clarkson and they are pushing back for the playoffs. Here we go. This deal is tradable at some point. It won't be this season. It's not a bad deal. Clarkson's totally okay. But what it does do is guys that people thought had these huge, big moments as rookies, like Ochai Agbaji in particular, he's not going to get to play. Sorry, that's not true. He will play, but he's not going to get a role because their starting lineup, I would guess, is Colin Sexton, Jordan Clarkson, Larry Markkinen, John Collins, Walker Kessler, with a bench that includes Kelly Olynyk, Agbaji, Horton Tucker, Hendricks, Olynyk. Did I say Olynyk twice? There's Keontae George and Bryce Sensabaugh. I don't know where they're going to play. But guys like Agbaji, who put up okay numbers when a bunch of guys were injured at the end of last season, he doesn't have a clear path to do that this year. So I think the Jazz got better by mainly just bringing John Collins in for nothing. That's an improvement for them. The guys who started to put together some numbers, even like a Chris Dunn, who put together good numbers. Chris Dunn might be better than Colin Sexton. It's a little bit squishier now on that team. Alex Len goes back to Sacramento, 1-year minimum deal. Again, could have done that without sending out your draft pick. He actually, for a guy that was out of the rotation early in the season, stepped up at the end and took over from Chimezie Metu, who's now in Phoenix, and from Richaun Holmes, who's now in Dallas. His sort of resurgence, ascension towards the end of the year, Len, where it did limit what Trey Lyles was able to do. Lyles was playing a lot of backup 4, backup 5, and then Len came in and started playing the 5, and that limited what Lyles could do. So they're both back. It makes the team strong and deep and gives them good reserves. It's not a game changer. It's just the same guy back on the team. Jared Rhoden signs another 2-way with the Pistons. I'm not really convinced that he's a strong NBA player. Luka Garza goes back to Minnesota. We know he can score, and when there are opportunities there, he will go out and put up numbers. He does get cooked a little bit defensively, but he can shoot. Might as well have him there. He's not going to play much with Gobert, Towns, Nas, Reed coming back, the Wizard of Noz. And then the other one, which I've left till now because I don't know, I just didn't want to highlight him. You know what? That's not true because I put him on the thumbnail because it is important. Miles Bridges is back with the Hornets. Miles Bridges signs the $7.9 million qualifying offer, and I've got a lot of thoughts on this. Miles Bridges did some pretty shitty things. That pretty shitty is underselling it. It was disgusting, and I have no sympathy for him whatsoever. Right? Disgusting stuff. And you can tell me, oh yeah, we all make mistakes. Bashing the shit out of the mother of your kids in front of them, it's not a mistake that people make, right? It's shit. I don't know what was going on for him. Has he served the punishment? I get, like, maybe. What punishment did he have? Some community service? He didn't play all of last season. Sure, he's got a 10 or 20 game suspension. 10 game suspension to start this season. But he was very, very solid as a player the year before that. Really, really good. But what this indicates to me is that the arrival of the new owners in Charlotte, or the, again, ascension into power of those guys, and we talked about this last week saying there were some rumors that they weren't particularly keen on him being back. This is almost, and please understand what I'm trying to say here, this is almost best case scenario for Charlotte. You don't go out there and offer him 4 years, $50 million. And people go, man, why are you paying this guy this much? You have the tender that's out there, which I think I would have felt better about just pulling it and going, well, just we don't want you on this team. But the ball was in his court. You didn't actually go out and technically offer him a contract. He just signed the restricted tender. That's it. And he's back on a 1-year deal, which I believe he can't be traded on. And then he hits the open market next season. But what this also shows is that the NBA, as a general rule, the NBA there was no market for him because he could have gone and signed an offer sheet with any team. Has to be 3 years to sign an offer sheet. But I'm guessing most teams were like, no, we'll sign you 3 years. 3 years, $10 million. That's me making up, not reporting that. But that's what I feel like might have happened. He said, well, I'll just sign the $7.9 million qualifying offer and become unrestricted. We'll see if another year being back in the spotlight rehabilitates his image and other teams want to take a reduced PR hit next summer versus this summer. And the Hornets, where does he fit now? So their lineup, LaMelo, Terry Rozier, Mark Williams, Brandon Miller. You think that's 4 of their 5 starters. Although Steve Clifford in the past has been unbelievably reluctant to play rookies. He has been on coaching teams who have had the 4th overall pick, Cody Zeller, the 6th overall pick, Mohamed Bamba. There's another guy in there that I can't really think, and he does not play them minutes. Mark Williams was a 3rd string center until January. Eventually, he got the job towards the end of the year. So Brandon Miller's competition is going to be Bridges and it's going to be Gordon Hayward. So while it makes sense that Miller should start, maybe he doesn't. Maybe he plays 26 minutes off the bench. Bridges returning, I would guess he'd be the favourite to start at the 4, but what does this mean for PJ Washington Jr.? Because he's still a restricted free agent. He was their starter at the 4 last season. Are they going to prioritise Bridges, who they don't appear to have great value on bringing back long-term because they would have signed him to a longer-term deal? Does Bridges just stay as a reserve? Even though he's a better player than Hayward, he's a better player than Miller, he's a better player than Washington right now. I assume, 1 year out of the game, I assume he's still that good. So it is an interesting scenario. This doesn't automatically make Miles Bridges a top 50 fantasy player that he was back 2 years ago. Because there's still some uncertainty of how the Hayward, Miller, Washington, Bridges, all those 4 guys, how they're going to work into the 96 minutes that are available at the 4 and the 3. Still some question marks there. And I don't know what happens with Washington. And that brings us to talking about the best players. Well, not the best. This isn't in order either. But the players who are available still in free agency. PJ Washington's up there. Restricted free agent. He's wildly inconsistent. I think he's an okay defender. He's quite short. He's not a great rebounder. The shooting's all over the place. But I think he's worth it. If I was the Bulls, I'd be trying to get him in. I don't think they can with their contract or their cap situation. The Spurs. There are plenty of teams, like currently the Miami Heat's power forward still is Caleb Martin. PJ Washington there would be awesome. I don't think they can't do it. It needs to be weird side and trade sort of stuff. There's a whole bunch of stuff that will need to happen. But Washington's an okay player. He's probably a starting caliber player and could get pushed into a very small role this season depending on how restricted free agency plays out. And the same goes with Grant Williams, who I think would be awesome in San Antonio. Whether he would start next to Wembanyama or play 25 minutes off the bench behind Wembanyama and Collins, I don't know. He is a guy that's never going to be a fantasy great option, Grant, but he's available, and I don't think he's back in Boston to be their 4th big man behind Porzingis, Rob Williams, and Al Horford. Christian Wood's available. It's rough to be a big man. This is what we talk about a lot in drafting, in fantasy, but also drafting in real life, is there are so many solid, unless you're an elite big man, Embiid, Jokic, those guys are game changers, right? Unless you're an elite big man, there's just so many mid big men. You can find 50 of them who could all start and play 24 minutes. And Christian Wood's one of them. Grant Williams is one of them. PJ Washington's one of them. And that suppresses their market. And that's why when you overspend on centers, that I'm going to be critical. And that's back to the Sabonis stuff. He's not on the Embiid, Jokic level. He's very good. He's not on that level. So does that end up somewhat of an overpay? Wood's available. His defense is atrocious. We know he can score. If he ends up on a really bad team, he will put up numbers. But I can't see a great fit for him at this point. Kelly Oubre, the guy that seems destined to be one of the last players signed in free agency. When he came to Charlotte the first time, he was, he signed in like September on some weird deal. And really elevated last season because Ball was out, Hayward was out, Bridges was gone. Martin was out all season. He is quite a bad fantasy player who took advantage of the opportunity to score 20 points per game last season. He is, to me, a very clear reserve player. He'll find a role somewhere as a 6th or 7th man, but I doubt he's a fantasy option. Dario Saric is available still too. Another big man who's just solid enough. Reserve big man, starting big man, power forward, center, probably more center. Shooting goes back and forward. Defense is below average probably. But he's an okay player. He's a rotation player. He's got a spot somewhere. Ayo Dosunmu is a restricted free agent. I don't think he's back in Chicago. Yes, they lost Pat Beverly, but they brought in Javon Carter, and they re-signed Kobe White, and there is Alex Caruso there, so I'm not sure that Chicago looks to bring him back. I am very much more down on Dosunmu than others, although I do think he would make sense. Like if he went to San Antonio, really solid backup or minute split guy with Trey Jones. I'd be looking into that as San Antonio, and I don't love Dosunmu as a player. I think he is destined to be a backup in the NBA. Paul Reed, restricted free agent. I think the Sixers should be looking to bring him back to be their backup behind Embiid. I think they will. It won't be a big contract. It might be like 3 years, 15 or something. Malik Beasley's available. He is a shooter, and that is it. He's one of the best at getting shots up. They don't always go in, and he sucked in LA. He had some moments at times in Minnesota and sometimes in Utah, but ideally he's a bench scoring guard who needs the shots to go in. And you worry that if that shooting's not there, he's basically unplayable. Basically unplayable because his defense is terrible. But he's available and he will be signed somewhere, I'm sure. And then we get in, hold on to your dicks, guys, we get into a bunch of other centers who are available. Mo Bamba.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Bamba is, like I said earlier, he's in that group of players that everyone thinks he just needs a chance, man. Mo Bamba is okay. He is okay. He can sort of shoot. He can block shots. He's a bad defender. His basketball IQ seems on the lower side. He can't pass. He's a black hole. He gets cooked too much, but he puts up highlight plays. Man, we just need a big man who blocks shots and shoot threes. That's really good if you're Kristaps Porzingis. But Bamba just takes so much off the table. If you bring him in as a third center, I'm never going to argue with you on that. If you bring him in as a backup to play 15, 16 minutes a night, totally okay. Totally okay. The reason the Magic got the first overall pick to draft Paolo Banchero is they played Mo Bamba as a starter. And he's not that player. He can be okay, but he's just all over the place in terms of consistency and defense and even shooting. The theory is there, but we've seen it, haven't we? Like, I just don't think he's ever developing into a starter. The cockroach Mason Plumlee. There's some talk that the Clippers would consider moving on from Ivica Zubats, bringing back Plumlee and making him a starter. And what is the chokehold that Mason Plumlee has over the NBA? He is okay. I don't think he's very good defensively. He's not a great rim protector. He's an okay passer, but if you're running your offense through Mason Plumlee, then you're going to have a bad offense. It's like one of those things. Well, he can actually pass. He can. But in order for him to do that, he needs the ball, and that makes the whole offense shithouse. Big steps forward for him in his free throw shooting last season with a weird lefty push. Absolutely strong as a backup center, no problem. But as you've seen, there's a lot of backup big men around who you can bring in. And he is older. He's not going to be the guy that we saw at the beginning of last season with Charlotte putting up those big minutes. MC Hamidou Diallo.
Stop. Have a time.
He's basically a center in a 6'6" body. Very, very good defender. Horrible offensive player. Can't shoot. Need him to play basically like Houston Rockets Russell Westbrook with all shooters around him. I think teams should have it. He's young. They should have a look somewhat as an energy defensive guy, but if you're playing him more than 20 minutes a night, you're going to be bad. Torrey Craig, maybe he's just a little bit too old, and guys like Keita Bates-Diop replace him. Yeah, the drafting of Tamani Kamara probably signaled the end of Craig. He'll probably end up, he only seems to play for two teams. It's Phoenix or Indiana. Is he going to end up back in Indiana? Maybe. Don't think he's going to have a strong role, though. I like these next two players a lot. Terrence Davis, that's not true. Terrence Davis, real shitbloke energy. Not quite as bad as Bridges, but shitbloke charges for him when he's up in Toronto. I think he can be a decent NBA player, but he's never really had that. He's never really stuck anywhere, and there's reasons for that. I think Lindy Waters, who I don't know why Oklahoma City retracted his qualifying offer. I think if we had, okay. If you had to make a decision between Lindy Waters or Malik Beasley, I might take Waters, taking into consideration that you won't have to pay him as much. Equivalent shooter, I'm pretty sure they're the same height. Waters is younger. I don't know. I think he's being a little bit. Yeah, Waters is 6'6". He's 25. He shot 36% from three on 5 attempts per game, playing 15 minutes a night. Like, that is volume. There are issues with the rest of his game, but he's a minimum guy. The way that Thunder developed him, and especially Isaiah Joe, Waters can be that guy on another team. Bismack Biyombo, still a really strong rim protector, but obviously older, and offense is disgusting. But another big man that you can bring in and say, okay, if you need to get out there for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 19 minutes and do something, I feel okay about it. Sfima Hailuk, I would sort of said he was done, and then ended in Charlotte when they shut everybody down and started and played well. Now, he's not a starter. He's not going to get a starting role anywhere. But I thought Svi was really, really solid and probably should be looked at as a backup third shooting guard sort of a player. Interesting sort of guy. The last group of guys, there are a few names here I think are interesting. Javonte Green, maybe his knee is just rooted. He was better than Patrick Williams last season. He's like an undersized power forward. Think even like Hamidou Diallo, but better offense. I would, if I'm a good team, if I'm Denver, this is what I would have prioritized over Justin Holiday. He is a guy that should sign with a playoff type of team, and he can be useful. Jalen Noel, with the bringing in of Shake Milton, re-signing of Nickeil Alexander-Walker, doesn't look like he's back in Minnesota. There is scoring, very much scoring upside. He did have some disappointing moments. I still think he's worth a flyer. Trendon Watford was weirdly cut by the Blazers. He had some moments. He can't really seem to stay healthy. He's probably a little bit undersized to play the 5. I would absolutely be giving him a shot. Like the Celtics brought in O'Shea Brissett. I think Watford's way better than O'Shea Brissett. But that's the sort of situation where I think Watford can thrive. Terrence Ross, yeah, I fear he might be cooked. Struggled with the Suns. Didn't play well with the Magic. A shooter who hasn't shot well for a while. I wouldn't be prioritizing him. I would be looking at Don Barlow, who played as a two-way guy for the Spurs. Hasn't been brought back yet. Probably will be. But a big man from Overtime Elite who's got some defensive chops. Teo Maledon, much like Svi Mykhailiuk, thought he played okay towards the end of last season. And when you're looking for a third-string point guard, he can hold up in that role, maybe even a backup. He's an okay player. Anthony Lamb, we saw Ty Jerome get signed by the Cavs. Lamb, I thought, was played way too much by Steve Kerr last season. The Warriors should not bring him back, and he's also got real shitbloke tendencies too. But he is available. I don't think I'd prioritize him. And then Wenyen Gabriel, who I thought showed some flashes as well for the Lakers last season, and just another big man with some bounciness, maybe some shooting upside, probably does deserve to be on an NBA roster somewhere. And that will do it for me today. Don't forget, follow this podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and on the Odyssey app and on YouTube. Thumb it up. Leave your comments down below. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.